Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show for creative agencies, the go-to resource for agency owners looking to scale their business. Join us every week to stay ahead of the curve and position your agency for future success.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. This is going to be a great episode. Very excited for our guest today. Jody and I hung out with our guest recently down in Nashville, and we were really able to see the Pinnacle experience. And prior to that trip down to Nashville, I was actually able to create a Pinnacle Business Guide. And so I know the work that goes into the work that Pinnacle does. So very excited to introduce Greg Cleary and welcome him to the show. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Thanks very much. Excited to be here.
And as always, joined by Jody Grundon. So Jody, welcome to the show as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
All right. So before we get started and talking about Pinnacle and everything, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got where you are now?
Short version or long version?
I want to hear the long version, Greg. Long version is kind of cool. We'll cut you off if it's too long.
Right, give me the hand signal. So it all started back. I was an entrepreneur. I was going through high school, and I was a waiter at this place in Niagara Falls called the Skyline Tower. And I would look down into the park, acres and acres, hectares of green space. You couldn't buy a hot dog in Niagara Falls in the park. It was the honeymoon capital of the world, 10 million visitors. And so I got my entrepreneurial itch started there, and I created a little business called Picnic in the Park. And we would deliver picnic baskets to tourists down there, and I gave them, the red and white checkered cloth, cheese and crackers and veggies and dip and all this. And that was my start of my little entrepreneurial journey, if you like. While I was doing that, one of my girlfriend's mom was in Amway, and she invited me to go to a seminar because she knew I was entrepreneurial. And I went to this seminar called The Psychology of Achievement, and it was by a guy named Brian Tracy. And I loved it. It was the first time it was never heard. He just said, if you want to be a doctor, you study medicine. You want to be a lawyer, you study law. If you want to be successful, you should study success. And so I went and asked him for a job. And I still remember I had like a wool tie and, my cloth shoes back then. And this was probably 1985. And he gave me a part-time job selling training in Niagara Falls. It was $100, and people would come for this one-day training. And so that was the start of my training career in 1985. And my first month, I went out and sold 7 people to come. I made about $140 commission, $20 per person commission. And as I say, the rest is kind of history. So I moved my way up. I just drank the Kool-Aid. I figured if I was going to be successful selling training, why not sell sales training in there? Because if it didn't work, it couldn't be me, Jamie, right? It would be the trainer, right? It would be the coach, it would be the guide.
That's right.
So I became like the number one person in Ontario. They made me the national sales manager. I moved to Toronto at a young age, and literally our team of 6 or 7 people would outperform teams of 100. And I became the top selling rep in all of Canada. And then they asked me if I wanted to move to the United States. This is where you really want to pay attention to your geography when you're in Canada. So we were living in Niagara Falls, Toronto, and they say, would you like to move to the States? You are thinking you are moving south. But if you don't pay attention to geography, you move to Minneapolis, you actually move north by about 7 hours. So I am 7 hours further north as the crow flies. And moved to Minneapolis, came here and started working with Peak Performance Network. That was Brian Tracy and Harvey McKay morphed into it. We would go then sell memberships. People would buy a membership to go see all the different speakers. We'd go to St. Louis, we'd go to Chicago and Boston and the John B. Hines Convention Center in Seattle, San Francisco. Went everywhere. It was awesome. You're single. The company was paying for our housing. We'd stay at the Residence Inn or whatever. And I'd go around cities and do all these workshops, cold calling, and built my own workshops, 90-minute workshops, no cost, no obligation. And I just really enjoyed it. I loved it. And so I moved up through the ranks again and became the national sales manager for them and did that through the early 90s. And in 1996, I decided that I wanted to do something on my own, back to that entrepreneurial itch. And I left. I was going to move to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, the president of the National Speakers Association, Tom Wininger, said, "Hey, Greg, you're the best person I've ever met at like marketing and selling training.
Mm-hmm.
If you would stay here in town and help me for 3 months, I will help you get any speaker you want on your lineup in the country. Lou Holtz, Rick Pitino, Pat Riley, like anybody you want, celebrity, Blanchard, you tell me who you want." So I thought, oh, that's probably a good idea. So I got in there, and within the first month, I had already sold clients
Mm-hmm.
before they actually had product. And he came and said, "Hey, would you like to be a partner? And would you like to stay in Minneapolis?" I'm like, no, we just sold our house. We're leaving. Type
Oh,
of
you
thing.
just sold your house.
Yeah, we sold the house because we are leaving, like sold the house in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, "I'll give you 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. We're getting closer, right? As we get so I stayed around, and from 1996 to 2001, we grew this business called Team Track. The model had changed, like everything. We're going to talk about change, hopefully today, but models change. And so those big mega seminars with thousands of people in the conference room or the convention center, that model changed, right? When COVID came along, you wouldn't want to be in that business. So in the 90s, it became the train the trainer model, where we would do, VHS tapes and audio cassettes and workbooks, and we would, train 1 or 2 of your people. We'd give you all the curriculum, and you go back to your company and did customer service and sales and management training. So I did that up till 2001. And one of my biggest clients was Patterson Dental. They had like 900, people going through this in 86 branches. We were all over the place. Everyone remembers what happened on September 11th. I was going in to do a workshop, and I pulled up. I walked in, and there was nobody at the front desk. And I heard crying down the hallway. Went down the hallway and watched the towers come down. And I realized I just wanted to get off the road. I had traveled a lot, well over 100 plus nights, living on the road, 11 months of the year, all those things.
Yep.
And so I decided I was going to do my own sales coaching. So I told Tom I was done. Tom Wininger, my partner. And I hung up my shingle to be a sales coach. And I was pretty confident after being in literally 5,000 companies doing workshops. If you are just observant at all, you start to learn what works, what doesn't work, right? The car dealerships, the stock brokers, the financial planners, the people sell pre-need in St. Louis. There's a company in St. Louis that sold pre-need, pre-arranged funerals.
Okay.
And they're all young people going in, and they're selling $5,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000. You start to learn if you're observant. And so my deal was back in 2001 was I would write your sales process. I would then get a business card. I'd go with the salespeople. And the unique part of my story was, rather than just write the prescription and say, go do it, I would go on the sales calls. And at any time, a salesperson can say to me, "Hey, Greg, do you have any questions?" So that was code for when they were in trouble or didn't know where to go, they just turned it over to me. So, I looked like I was like the younger guy, right? I was probably 35 at that point. And they were like, "Yeah, do you have any questions?" So I made these processes work. I made the sales processes work. I did that, grew some great experiences, great companies, great journeys, took companies from literally 25 million into $300, $400, $500 million, be their sales coach, truly nationwide companies. And then in around 2008, 9, when the big recession hit, I got a call to go out to work for a trade organization. They had 130,000 members. They lost 30,000 members.
Wow.
And they needed a whole new approach to national business development. And so I hired a team. I said, why don't we take this like SEAL Team 6 approach? Give me 6 rock star salespeople. At this point, my DNA, Jody and Jamie, was you could just parachute me into a city. Give me a yellow pages. Give me my Motorola phone with the big gray one that you could bounce off the ground and catch. It was 50 cents a minute back then. So give me that, and I would go make a living. And so we called upon the Hyatts and the Marriotts and the Hiltons, and we went to Centerbuild and went to every trade show, and we did a top-down approach and really turned that business around. They paid us a lot of money to do that. And while I was in that journey, somebody asked me if I'd read the book Traction. And I looked at the name on the front cover. It was Wickman. Gino Wickman, and I knew that was an odd name, and I just said, I wonder if there were any relationship to Floyd Wickman. Floyd was a speaker on my lineup at Peak Performance Network.
Okay.
And Floyd came around to all the different cities for us. And what he did is he created a training program called the Sweat Hogs program for Central 21. And so they literally got people out and did farming and door knocking and did all these things.
Yep.
So when I called Gino, I knew all these dads' material, Mr. and Mrs. Wichakowski over in Happy Hollow. Are you looking for an ideal home in a quiet neighborhood? Like, who's not looking for an ideal home? Are you looking for a high interest return on your investment with no risk? Like, who says no to that, right?
Right.
So Gino said, man, you really do know my dad. And so I went to Detroit and got certified in this thing called traction. A fun. I know you've interviewed some of our colleagues as well, Jody, but a fun question to ask people is, how much do they pay for their certification? So my partner in Pinnacle, Dwayne, he was free. So you're in early when it's free.
Yep.
I paid $2,900, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now people are paying tens of thousands of dollars. So you're on the ground floor. I was the 8th certified implementer. I set a whole bunch of records. So I was truly in the ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for just about a decade. And along that way, worked on my craft. The way we introduced clients to Traction was we did this no cost, no obligation workshop. So having done thousands and thousands of them, it was just a natural fit for me. Mm-hmm. And I ended up teaching about 200 implementers how to do, what I was doing, because I was just setting so many records. I was the first person to get to $1 million and blew right on by that in terms of fees for, someone without an assistant. That was a big accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So that took me up to 2010 to 2019, the fall of 2019. And it's been about 10 years. And if you looked at my, career from 1985 to 1995 to 2001 to 2010, I just know that about every 10 years, models change. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness we weren't doing the train the trainer model, right? Trying to sell videos, right? Can you say YouTube?
Yeah.
Like I just saw an audio cassette program. We used to sell The Power of Ambition by Jim Rohn. It was $120 for 6 cassette albums in a case from Nightingale Conant out of Chicago. And that now audio program, which is still awesome. I just listen to it. I bought it for $6.21. So, can you say the market's changed? And of course, all these programs, you're going to want to go watch, Jeffrey Gitomer. I mean, they have 400 videos on YouTube, right? You want to go see, any of the speakers, Tommy Hopkins, anybody, they're all out there now. Mm-hmm. So the models change as the world goes around. And I'm glad I've changed every decade as well to stay relevant. I've had people who've told me, Joe, who've known me a long time and said, Greg, the one thing you really do really well is you pay attention to the marketplace and you kind of, know when to make a move. And it's hard to make a move when everyone, as you know, is doing its best night and day to make you just like everyone else. And that's, it's called group thinking, right? When the whole group is thinking the same thing, somebody's not thinking. Right. I love the quote. I think it was a Jim Rohn quote. Said, if you want to know what to do when you enter a marketplace, look what everyone else is doing and then do the exact opposite. Right. Yeah. And you two guys could talk about this, right? It's really hard to sell when everyone's buying, right? It's really hard to buy when everyone's selling, right? Like, it's really hard to go against your intuition in the market, but I just know this is what we should do with dollar cost averaging or our strategy or our long-term. So anyway, we started, if I just keep going there. So in the fall of 2019, I had a mastermind group. There's about 25 of us, and decided that there was another way. And so my approach for the last few years that I was in Traction was I was always focused on the client. That was just my customer service model, my sales model. Like, everyone believes their business is different. No one wanted to buy, a cookie cutter sales process, right? If you went in and said, hey, I got this thing, and no matter what industry you're calling upon, you just do the same questions. They go, no. And our proposals are different, or, we do a discovery over here, or we do a financial plan over here, or we do analysis over here, right? So everyone had a different program. So I just took that same approach and said, what if instead of focusing on the tool, you focused on the client and brought the right tool at the right place and the right time? And that rather than hire anybody, it doesn't matter who you hire, make that a really big part of it. That hire a guide who can relate to you, who's going to push you, right? Who's going to help you be better. And I have a son who plays, hockey at elite level, is going off to play junior hockey. That has always been our mantra. Like, is the coach going to make you better? And if the coach is going to make Ben better, he's going to be there and show up and practice. And if the coach just yells and screams and, is not a good communicator and doesn't have a good toolbox and doesn't help you get better, then get out of there, right? Life is too short to be around there. So I took that approach and we started kicking around what that would look like. One of the first things we did, Jody, you probably appreciate this, is hired an industrial designer, like way over. We're like a startup company and thinking, well, the first thing, it's going to be about the brand. That if we're really going to be a category of one, it starts with having gorgeous materials that are going to resonate, at that next level. And so we hired an industrial designer. We spent about 5 months getting things ready. And then on March 4th, my marketing, I thought March 4th was a great date to launch a new brand.
Yeah.
So we launched Pinnacle March 4th in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And you know where this is going, 2020. On March 5th and 6th, 25 of us, so it was 40 people in Dallas when we launched. And 25 of us stayed behind this mastermind group to go see Pat Lencioni's The On Conference, and Alan Mullally was speaking, who he's famous for his one-page plan, literally on a 5x8 postcard that he had at Boeing, and did the same thing when he went to Ford. And Southwest Airlines and all these great people are speaking, and we're just having a great time and getting our pictures taken with all these people. And then, so that was the 5th and 6th. And then I flew back home, and on the 8th of March, I went down to Marathon, Florida. Vern Harnish has a CEO summit, and I was going to be their guest CEO. Okay. And we're at the marathon retreat, and these people have flown in on their own planes or their private planes, and you all know what happened. The later that week, right? Yep. We watched the entire world shut down, and these executives went back on their private planes. I took my luggage, threw down the Key West, and got on Delta. And came home. And that was our humble beginnings. That was the start of this thing called Pinnacle. And so just a couple of things I would say is, I think part of the success, even though we're a new company, we've grown very quickly because we've stayed in the lane, right? If either one of you to go start a new company tomorrow, you're not new to the business. You would know your mistakes. You have scar tissue. You know what to do. So we're able to put all that wisdom to work right away. I think the fact that we have stayed relevant and current and stayed in the same industry, but just changed and made as changes happened, that we did that. And then, of course, got really good people, like surrounded ourselves with really good people. And if you will just get out of your own way and you let people share, and that's really our model, right? You've been at our summits. There's 25 people up presenting, right, and doing different things and breakouts and talks and sharing and putting their DNA on this. So that's what got us to where we are now. We're over 100 guides here in the United States, really trying to be that category of one, that boutique firm that really it is all about, a great client experience, help them grow faster than they thought possible, bring in curated tools that they've never seen to help them break through, wherever they are. So that's my story.
Yeah, ton unravel there. Wow, yeah, we got a ton of. I got a ton of questions personally, Jim. I'm sure you do too.
I do too. Yep, definitely.
The one thing that I want to hit right off the bat is that I don't know, Greg, if you knew, I worked for Vector Marketing for about 3 to 4 years, and we sold Coach cutlery, and so we did. This was back right before college, and with that, it was cold calling. It was basically presentations to sell very expensive, high quality cutlery to folks all across the nation. And I too did really well with that. In Midwest, I was number one in the Midwest in sales, opened up a branch office, recruited other folks to do exactly what I was doing and train those folks up to be able to sell. And the one thing that it wasn't the one issue they had, or the one, I guess, barrier of success, in my opinion, is what they had is that, and I never had this issue, and it doesn't sound like you had this issue as well, but it was actually making the call, making the call to somebody to actually schedule the appointment. Once people were on the appointments, they did really well. Their closing ratio was high, that they had very success, but the one thing holding them back, what was that fear of making that call. And throughout your journey there, man, you've had many different opportunities for that fear to take over
Yeah.
and really
Yeah.
kind of squash things. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there that secret pill or secret sauce, or how do you overcome it, or why does that happen? I'd love to get your opinion on
Yeah.
that, because I think that's a main barrier for really anybody, not only in sales, but anybody in
Yeah.
general, whether it's
I
applying for a
think
job or whatever.
Jody, it's really the 6 or 7 inches between your ears, right? I mean, that's what determines. I mean, if you look at the people who are great in any profession, and from the Tom Brady who had a chip on his shoulder because he didn't get picked, so he's going to prove them all wrong, and he's going to outwork them,
Hmm.
to people who grew up like I had a tough upbringing. I was in an orphanage for a few years. If you wanted something back when I was growing up, you just had to go earn it, right? I had a paper route, and we would pay for the papers, and you had those people that didn't pay you for 4 weeks. You had those little tabs you used to give them, and so you got good at that. But if you wanted to make extra money, then you volunteered to go sell new subscriptions, right? So you got in the van and went with the regional guy, and you would knock on doors and try and sell them. If you couldn't sell them the whole week, you try and sell them just the Sunday paper with the TV guide and the comics back then. But it just really became, I did have the head trash. I never wanted to be in sales, but you have to change your perspective. It's back to everything in life. Fear, one definition is false evidence appearing real, right? So I have this fear, that fear of rejection, fear of failure, whatever. And there's another acronym for fear, and that's face everything and rise. And one is a very motivating, like empowering one. I read the books, The Greatest Salesman in the World. I can almost quote the scrolls. I will greet this day with love in my heart, for it is the greatest day of all. Like, I had to literally talk myself into it. But then I made a game of it, people to hang up on me or I'd call, or, I've got so many great, funny, amazing stories around that, as you can imagine, from just call right back and ask for a different person, right? But uh, I would do that. How we got started. So my first city, Cleveland, Ohio, in the States, I come here, we rent these 2 apartments. Literally, alls we had was, I bought a headset from Radio Shack. It was a little keypad with the earpiece, the one mic, and we had the yellow pages, literally the yellow pages. And I turned into the yellow pages, and we would start. Everyone starts in the A's, so I never start in the A's. Like, I would just start in G or H, like just somewhere else, because the A's get a lot of calls, but nobody gets to the G's.
Right.
So I would just call anybody and everybody who had a had a sales team. And I knew the car dealerships, they would meet on Saturday morning, but the realtors would meet on Monday morning. And the stockbrokers wouldn't talk to me till the market closed at 4 o'clock. And the furniture companies would talk. And so I knew all these different industries. And I would just call, I would ask for the sales manager. You had to learn all the tricks, right? If you say, can I speak to the sales manager? They're like, well, who is this and why are you calling? And so we just got better, right? Hey, I'd like to send some information out in order to get to the right person. Can you tell me who's responsible for your sales team? Oh, that would be Jody. Okay, and how do you spell Jody's last name? Okay, great, I'll send that. Well, you can call back 15 minutes later and say, hi, can I speak to Jody? Right? So, and they wouldn't get any rejection at that. So you just had to learn that. And it's just systematic desensitization, just doing it over and over and over and over, and turn frustration into Isn't that fascinating? I've now made 20 calls and no one wants to talk to me today, right?
Yeah.
It is right here. And so many people, Jody, they don't make it in life because of that, who they are. And I think there's people that come into our country, as you know, who have this motivation. And you read these stories, we meet these leadership team members, and their stories are about, man, my parents got divorced. I had to figure it out, right? Something happened to me, to my brother, something. And you realize this person has all this motivation and nothing's going to stop those people. And when you hear their stories, you're like, I would bet on that stock right today. Like, if that's the story, that's the stock, I'm all in. So after a while, then I started getting scientific about it. I knew there was words like, don't say did I catch you at a good time, because it's never a good time. It's
Right.
signals salesperson, right? Don't try and qualify them over the phone. Are you the decision maker? Like, there was just things that you had to do and evolve with it. And, to the point now where I've done it in my sales mastery classes with our guides, where I'll put a speaker on the table and I'll say, even back in my traction days, give me a name, anybody. I'll call anybody you like. I'll pick somebody off LinkedIn. I'll call a wealth manager in Chicago and talk to them, and I will get you a presentation. And they're like, you can't do that. And I would do that because, to me, it was just an opportunity to sharpen the saw, right? And the marketplace will teach you what you need to know. If you are willing to listen, the marketplace will teach you, what you're willing to learn. So anyway, that's the fear of cold calling, and now, of course, no one makes cold calls
Right.
Right.
anymore. With
Cold
social
emails.
media. Yeah, it's a billion emails later.
Yeah.
A different challenge, but I still believe in our industry and to the financial advisors and CPAs and people in finance. Nothing replaces a conversation. I say this today, all great clients were created with a conversation. None of them put a CPA in a shopping cart right over your 20-year histories. They might just said, oh, I'll take 2 virtual CFOs and I'll put them in the cart here. I'll go to
That's return policy on that.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen. But you need to have that conversation. You need to engage with them. And
Sure.
some people today are hiding, Jamie, behind emails and voicemails and texts and white papers and content and posts. And like sometimes you just have to pick up the phone. Here, I give these to all of our guides, and I make them put them on their phone.
There you go.
Pick me up, I make you money.
Yeah. That's great.
So, it's crazy. You need a sticker on your phone to remind you that when the phone is ringing, somebody's trying to buy. They're looking for help. And so sometimes my voicemail, I just call one of our guides today, and they said, if you're looking for help, you call the right place. That should be your answer, right? I mean, they're calling looking for help. Did they get a runaround or did they get help, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. So next question, I'm going to turn it a little bit more towards Pinnacle and what Pinnacle does. And I think there's 2 things to me that makes Pinnacle unique. And I'd love for you to kind of expand on both of them and then talk about, how you developed these 2 things. So obviously the first is the tools. So when Jody first saw the tools, he brought them home and he sent them to me in the mail and was like, Jamie, you have to check these out. This is what our CFOs need for training. They need to be this complete. They need to be this thorough. They really need to work through it. So that's the first thing that I think Pinnacle does really well. And I think the second thing is the team, is the guides, right? When Jody and I probably spoke publicly 50, 100 times in the past couple of years. And when I went to the Pinnacle, within the first day I was speaking with these guides, I was like, oh my goodness, I had to talk to all these intelligent people. How in the world am I going to get up on stage and teach these intelligent people anything? And I went home and practiced my speech by 10 more times before the next day because I was so
He was nervous
intimidated by
too.
the
I've never seen
intelligence.
him nervous in front of a speech. Yeah.
It was a
I was like,
sharp
they're
group
just
of people.
people.
Yeah, I know, but the guides that you bring in, I can tell you're selective, and I can tell you really think through making sure that you have the right guides to demonstrate those tools. So I'd love for you to kind of expand on those 2 things.
So I'd go back to, the tools. I've always been a reader, a prolific reader. I don't have an advanced degree in anything. I don't have a college education. And so I am from the school of, like, you got to go out and learn it and teach it and do it to yourself. There's no Calvary. No one's coming to the rescue. And so I have read literally thousands of books. And I believe if you just look at the history of the world, right? It used to be if you had a strong back, and I'm just going back to, turn of the century even, you had a strong back in Minnesota, you went up to the lumber mills or you went down to the docks, right? And you just worked your back and you could make a living. And just fast forward now, we are definitely knowledge workers right today. And so it is information and it is access. It's not who do you know, it's who knows you, right? I mean, it has changed. And so with the speed of information and how fast it's doubling and tripling, you have to be tuned in today. And anybody who thinks they have the market cornered on good ideas, it's just false. And if there is a good idea in the West Coast, it's on the East Coast by dinner, right? I mean, if somebody comes up with something in the Midwest, it's on both coasts, right? I mean, it travels around the world, right? Somebody comes up. I'm talking about anything. Like I'm gonna have a lobster roll that's deep fried. Somebody will love that, and it goes viral, right? Type of thing. So I've always believed, and this goes back to my peak performance days, we would bring in these thought leaders, and Harvey McKay would say, practice makes, perfect. And Brian Tracy would come up the week later and say, no, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. If you have a hook in your golf swing and you don't fix it, keep practicing your hook. You're going to have a gorgeous hook in your golf swing. Damn, like he is right? Of course he's right. So these people just learn and build upon their information. I have some books here behind me in my bookshelf, and they are well over 100 years old. I have books, Orson Swett and Martin. Just go back, look about round boys and square holes and character and secret of achievement. And I mean, just these amazing, amazing books. And I go back there because it's like truth, right? Truth is timeless.
Mm-hmm.
And the ideas that they had then, we just, we have often packaged them up. So that's one of my source of tools. I'll give you an example. I was reading a biography of Napoleon Bonaparte. And it's one of those books where you're reading it. And if you ever read a book where it hits you so hard, you literally have to stop and close the book and think. So I'm reading this part. I'm sitting in my chair right over here by the window. And I'm reading this book. And he says, I have made a remarkable discovery. Men will die for ribbons. And I remember closing the book and I was thinking, man, that's still today. The Peace Medal, the Nobel Peace Prize, the Olympic medals, the Medal of Honor, the Purple Heart, it's the Service Arms, it's the Olympics, it's my kids' track and field. I mean, it's everything. Men will die for ribbons. And so, just fast forward today to, giftology and rewards and recognition and egos and everything else. I mean, it comes back to that, I'll get a badge, I'll get a like, I got my 10,000 steps. It's people will literally go do all that work, right? Just to get the little trophy on an icon on their phone or whatever accomplishments. So I'm a good student that way. And then, of course, just looking at the current, how people will come out and take now we're into specialized knowledge. So they'll take a topic like giftology or take a topic like extreme ownership. And Jocko will go out and write a book on extreme ownership and really talk about what does it mean to be in a healthy team where everybody in the leadership team says, no, that's my fault. That's my fault. That's my fault. That's my fault. Instead of everyone blames it on everybody else, right? Why they didn't get the rock done or whatever.
Yep.
So I am always looking for things that can really, I wanted to have an aha effect on the tools, Jamie and Jody. Like when you see that tool and we do that level up exercise, for example, I want them to say, wow, I never even thought about it that way. I never saw that. And the tool is just there to have a conversation, right? It's no different than anything else, right? And the old joke is, oh, if I only have a hammer, every solution's a nail. So I don't want to have just a hammer, right? Today, you need to have a great toolbox today. So I've spent a lot of time on it. Even this morning, I spent 3 hours with Caitlin, our second in command, looking at our curated tools. And there's 3 we're going to archive and sunset just because we have a better tool. There's another tool coming along. So we are in that evolution. Our tools are never done. They're always evolving. And a simple one, just, we did a graph for the talent assessment. And somebody said, hey, Greg, you should take the numbers off the line and put them into the space between the lines so people could write names in about where people are. I'm like, that's a great idea. 20 minutes later, in the digital world today, you make that tool better. And if you keep that mindset about evolving, you're going to have great tools around that. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that was great.
How do you get people to continue using the tool versus going off and doing kind of their own thing? Or do you really care? I mean, just as long as they get the job done, do you want them to use the tools or?
Yeah, so we have about 80 tools, Jody, and it's around people and purpose and strategy. You got to have a playbook and you have to perform at a high level. So this is our formula, right? Great people, right seats, doing it right, performing. So, but sometimes you need to have a different tool. Sometimes you just need to shake it up. Like I have literally said, what needs to be said that hasn't been said, because you just sense there's tension in the air, right? So some of those just need to have a conversation. But I'm not hung up. I trust that the people that we've hired or brought into Pinnacle truly are going to be the best judge to say what tool they should use. They're in the room, they're there 8 hours, right, that day with them. And if they know that this tool is just not working, it's not resonating, it's not clicking, and they have another tool that they can say, hey, well, how about this? And change the discussion, which changes the energy, which gets them to think differently, right, than what they do, then that tool has been successful. But this is back to why the guide is so important in ours, right? If you've been in with teams and you've bought companies and sold companies and hired people and fired people and lost your biggest customers and so on, and you have relevant experience to share, and you don't feel that you have permission to share that's a sad day for you and for the customer that could have prevented a big mistake from happening. So So, I mean, and that kind of leads us to those, the guides, if you hire really good people, and I'm proud to say I've handpicked every person. Have I made a couple of mistakes? Of course you have, right? But some people are really good, but I see the potential in every person who's joined our organization to make us better. Like that's my filter. Can they make us better? We all started as new guides at one time, right? 4 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But somebody, even all the guides in all these systems did have a point when they were the new guide coming into, scaling up or 4 disciplines, like you were the new guide that you had to learn. But back to that same thing, if they're willing to enter the danger, facilitate, have a great conversation, push people a little bit, know when to back off as well, and do what's right for the client, if they will come and do that and allow those people to be themselves, we have a couple of guides who are serial entrepreneurs, sold several businesses. We have 2 newer guides at the other end. They're both in their mid 30s, but amazing stories. One is Sal, Green Beret, so the top 1/2 of 1% of these organizations. Another one is Christian, and Christian flew literally Black Hawk helicopters for McChrystal in the theater, I guess they would call it, and Team SEAL Team 6 and all these deployments and so on. And when you learn like that they had to have a checklist for that helicopter, well, we could have a checklist for onboarding, right? Or that literally their decisions were life or death. I mean, or just what did the government invest in their training, for them? And then we talk about an entrepreneur who doesn't want to send their people off to, a half-day training class or I'm pretty sure that, if you're an Air Force pilot, they've spent 7 figures on you
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
to do your job, not to mention the fuel or the ammo or whatever else. And we should not hesitate to send people back to school, right, to read or learn something. So I handpicked the guides because I believe they can make us better. And we need some diversity in that group, right? A diversity of experience, of age, of background. And I think if we do that and then truly be open, one of the reasons my name is not on the front door, and I know a lot of training organizations when I was growing up, that's how you named them all. It was Brian Tracy and Dennis Waitley and Stephen Covey and Tommy Hopkins and Tony Robbins and Sandler, Slattery. They all put their name on the deal. And it's like, no, I'm back to, one person doesn't have the market cornered on good ideas. And so I'm going to put these really smart people in the room. This is my secret for business, for growing Pinnacle. Get really good people, help them create, full practices, and they have full practices because they're doing amazing work for their clients. And if I do that trifecta, if I get really good people, they're doing really good work and their clients are happy, that's biz dev. All right. It's got to be referral, and my phone's got to ring and people are going to say, hey, I've heard about you. And we're seeing that now, where, we just had a call from a Fortune 100 company that has 19,000 employees, and they're looking to partner with a platform. And at the end of our call, they're like, Greg, we love your philosophy and your approach, and we are very well aligned, and we'd love to figure out how we can do this. And they've spent, tens of $1 million figuring out this platform. And that's where I'm focused. I'm not trying to be like anybody else. We want to be in the category of one. That's where we're going. And you're going to be in the category of one by not looking at what everyone else is doing, but looking to say what needs to be done, what should be done, what is the right thing to do, and keep evolving and changing. And as long as we're, back to, if the rate of change outside your organization is faster than the change inside, you're becoming extinct, right? You're becoming irrelevant.
Yep.
And so as long as we are changing as fast or faster than the world around us, we're going to be just fine. Our clients are going to be just fine, right? The economy is going to be just fine if we keep doing that.
So kind of reversing that, then. So that's how you pick your guides and the people on your team. If I was a business owner out there, how would I pick a guide? Would I pick a guide versus all the different other organizations out there? What should I do? What kind of research should I do?
I think,
What should I
Jody,
be looking
yeah,
for?
I think those are the three big problems we're solving in the marketplace. Number one is there's so many systems, right? You go on Amazon, you buy a book, and it says people bought this book, also bought these three other books. And so
Right.
then you go down that rabbit hole, trying to figure out which one is right for you. This
Mhm.
one's more structure. This one's more discipline. This is less framework. This is more about execution or cash or whatever. So there's lots of them. So the number one problem is what system should you use?
Mhm.
And I believe that entrepreneurs should not be choosing their system. I think there's a flaw in that. And the analogy I use, I go to the Mayo Clinic every year for my own, physical.
Mhm.
And if you had cancer today, prostate cancer, you could go and try and figure out, should I get radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, homeopathic, naturopathic? Should I go to Mexico? Where should I go? Right? You could do all that, or you could say, I'm going to go find the best oncologist in the world for prostate cancer. And if they think I should do surgery tomorrow and then radiation, I think I'm doing surgery and radiation. I mean, that's one approach, right? Instead of me trying to figure it out.
Right.
So I don't think entrepreneurs should be choosing their operating systems or what formula they should do, but they should choose the guide. They should choose the guide, and the
Mhm.
guide is really important. And it comes down to chemistry. Like some guides are soft spoken, and some people are full of energy and bouncing off the wall. And if
Mhm.
you are a financial CPA that's kind of middle
Mhm.
of the road, and I put you in a room with me bouncing off the walls all day long for 8 hours,
Yep.
you will be exhausted by lunchtime. Right? You'll be worn out. But on the same token, do the reverse. If you want energy and you are that high energy CPA, and I give you someone who's monotone and talks a little, that's not a fit either. So
Right.
it's chemistry, it's background, it's experience. You want someone who's going to make you better, who's going to stand up to you, who's going to challenge your thinking, get you to think differently. And then when you're wrong, tell you you're wrong. And if you're right, support you as well when you're second guessing it as also. So I think the guide is really important. And then the
Mhm.
guide should choose the operating system, right? The
Right.
guide should decide, should you have a scoreboard or a scorecard? The guide should decide, oh, you should do profit first, right? That would be a great formula for you. Or you should have a separate account, or you should do this, right? The guide should be that person that brings the right tool to you and decide, hey, I can only go as fast as you can go, right? We use this mountain analogy. And I'm telling you, if you're a team of 25, 26 people that are all came out of the military and all, SEALs or Green Berets, you're going to run up that hill with a
Mhm.
100-pound ruck. If you got them who are 55 and 60 with bad knees, bad elbows,
Mhm.
a little SPF, and they're going to get
Yep.
burned,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
We're going to go a lot slower with those people because we got a history and reasons why it's not going to work. And so I got to go slower. And so I'm always like, I can go as fast as you can go. But in the end, you do want a coach who can just say, hey, can we just go another half mile? Or there's a beautiful view, or there's a great place to rest, or this would be a great place to stop. Or no, there's a snowstorm hitting us on the mountain. We are actually going down. We're gonna, do a reverse accountability chart, and we're laying off 5 people, and we're gonna get smaller to weather the storm. You want somebody who has that, I'm going to call them credentials or street chops or moxie or whatever, but they're comfortable. They're not trying to please you. They're here to do what's right for you, right?
Right.
Your doctor's not trying to please you. They're trying to do what's right for you, right? Type of
Mhm.
thing. So that's the trusted advisor role that I think we play is you can't be afraid you're going to lose the client. You're going to be afraid that I'm not going to get you to where you need to go, right? And we're going to run out of runway
Mhm.
is something that drives you. So that's kind of that is a huge difference, Jody. I don't know anybody who's taken that approach, who's
Mhm.
really saying, choose the guide, make sure it's a good chemistry fit. Um, you will outgrow your guide, like you'll outgrow your guide, right?
Sure.
And
Mhm.
that's okay, like because it's an infinite game. So hey, the person you needed when you're smaller, and now you're with Anders, and you're like a much bigger, more complicated. You're
Yep.
going to exotic places, like you're doing bigger retreats or speaking opportunities or
Mhm.
whatever. Like how I snuck that one in there, Jamie.
I did, yeah.
I was on the guest list, but I'm coming. I will be back on the guest list. But like as you grow, you need a different type of guide, right? So
Mhm.
if you were in roll-up mode, someone with mergers and acquisition would be great. Can you imagine hiring a guide? Let's say you're in your business and you can hire a guide that has, relevant experience building great operating systems and scaling companies and growing companies. And they were a great fit chemistry wise, right? Like you were similar in drive and alpha or what desire or goals or whatever. And they had industry experience. They came in and they knew CPA and financials and software and models and tax, and like it would be the trifecta, because usually it's one or the other, right? I know my business, but I don't know yours. And I would say, if this was back to the Cutco days with Vector, right? And by the way, I had a lot of those people buy tickets, Cutco, Kirby, because you guys were just pure sales organizations. If the guy couldn't sell, he was not hanging around very long.
Exactly. I was probably there.
Yes. And listen, and the Cutco, like you guys were such pioneers. Like you guys, instead of lowering prices, you raised the prices and said, let's give them the forever guarantee. The last set of knives you'll ever need to own.
Yeah, exactly.
So I digress. So anyway.
So I guess the follow-up question to that is if I'm listening to this podcast and I want a guide, is there a list on the website? How would I go about finding that guide?
Yeah, pinnaclebusinessguides.com, Pinnacle Business Guides or pinnaclebusinessguide.com. They'll both get you there. There's a map there in your state. And I would tell you to have a couple of conversations. Like I said, it's about, it's not a beauty contest, right? Jody, it's not a beauty contest or we are in trouble. But it really needs to be around, let them ask you some questions. And if a great guide is asking you questions you haven't thought about before, right? And they're asking you questions that you're like, and it's a good question because you're saying like, that's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that before, right, Joe? Like when should you do tax planning? At the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, right? When does your tax strategy work, right? Yep. If they are asking you questions you haven't thought about, then you're like, oh, these are connecting with me. I've never thought about that. And yes, I think that person can help me evolve and improve our system. So Jamie, I would say go there is a great starting point. We're happy to help you target in if you don't want to have those conversations or you're still not sure, just pick up the phone, give us a call. I'm happy. Anybody in my leadership team, anybody in our community would be happy to try and help you find the right fit. We would like you to be with Pinnacle, but it's more important that you're with the right fit for the long term. Like our average relationship is 5+ years, that people will stay with that guide. That's my experience and others is that when you're doing great work, they're going to stay, right? And I'm sure it's the same thing in your business, right? If you're happy and you have that trusted advisor relationship and you just help them get through another whatever, they just bought a business, sold a business, changed status in life, moved on to retirement. They're not thinking, hey, we're done. They're just thinking, let's get back here again in 6 months, right? Or 3 months. So it's the same relationship.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we're right in line with you guys. We're 4.5 to 5 years right now. So that's right there, being a virtual CFO platform. The last question I want to ask you is just about a word, and I'm hoping that you take it in the direction I'm hoping. But if I say the word change, what does that mean?
Well, if you don't like change, you're going to hate irrelevance. I have a postcard in my session room, Jody, and it's got pictures of everything from. It was only 10 years ago that we had computer labs. That if you were going to school, you literally had to sign up for the computer lab, and you went in there, for 2-3 hours. Now every kid's got 2 computers in their back, right? How would you like to be selling calculators? I remember when you guys probably still have calculators, but remember when everyone had a calculator, right? Like that was the big deal. Like was calculators, pagers. I was just watching the movie Air. He's got a pager on his hip and so on. Yep. We are changing. Kodak and these companies that were iconic companies who didn't stay up with change, they are gone, right? Sears was the original Amazon. They were the original catalog. It wasn't online, but you could buy just about anything you can imagine there. When you see the companies that just closed up, like Bed Bath & Beyond, right? They said we never changed fast enough. We did not keep up with it. Barnes & Noble waited 10 years before they got into the selling books online. It's so hard to recover from those things. And so it's no different than everything else. You're going to drive your car today. You're going to fly in a plane soon. The plane is off course 99%. It is constantly making adjustments. You're making adjustments on your way home all the time. And some people, for some reason, I don't know where they got this, is they're like, hey, I don't like change. And yet change is very positive. If I came in here tomorrow and said, you just won the lottery, we got to make some changes around here. No one would, right? No one would go like, oh my gosh, we don't want to make any changes. But if you come and say, we need to make some changes around here, right? We're not as profitable as we should be, or we've lost, or we got more, or I'm taking on 50 clients. We've got to make some changes like, oh, we're growing too fast or whatever. So there is about messaging and communication. And I think today's leaders, you need to embrace change, and you need to be really good at change management and the narration of it. Everyone is good with change if it's goal directed, right? Hey, you got to make some changes. You're retiring in Florida. You got to make some changes. You're going to lose 20 pounds, right? You got to make some changes. You just got grandkids, right? You're going to make changes. You just had a baby. You just got married. Everyone's good with that change because we think it's goal directed and we think we can control it. And as soon as we start talking about change that they think they can't control, all of a sudden people are digging their heels in. And I would just tell you, we are going to change dramatically. The speed of change is actually picking up. It's not slowing down. So I would just encourage everyone to embrace it. And just like you're driving your car, you be the one that's directing that change. And we're not, I remember this, I think this was a Jim Rohn quote, is that the reason birds fly south in the winter is because that's all they know how to do is fly south. And we are not birds. We can go north, we can go south, we can go west, we can go to the Caribbean. I mean, we can go anywhere. And we should embrace that change, right? We're not a tree. If we don't like it, we can leave, right? We can just go do something else tomorrow, today with this labor market. And so nothing is good. The only thing I can tell you is 100% certain is things are going to be just about the same as they've always been, except for change. Change is going to change, and things that you are not doing. I just talked about, remember I said the phone, 50 cents a minute?
Yeah.
I just, was at one of my clients, and we were talking about change. And I said the metered service model, because they were charging by the word and by the hour and everything, Jody. I said, we don't want a metered service model anymore, right? We used to get AOL online, for 600 hours on a CD. We used to get our phone by the minutes. We used to go get a rental car, and then you had to pay mileage for the rental car. I mean, all those metered services, and there's a few of them left, but they're all gone. Accounting and stuff. I'm trying to be nice to you guys. Versus it's on outcome and results, right? Listen, if we can do it in 2 hours and somebody else takes 5 hours, I mean, should I be penalized because I can do it in 2 hours, and make a bit more money, and they're going to take 5 hours to do it? Or they're going to use a yellow pad and a Texas Instrument calculator, and I'm going to use a software program to import all your information. So that's all I would tell you. And I can't wait to see what the future has in store for Pinnacle and for my friends and for our guides. And we are going to be the ones on that front line cheering, right? And saying, what a great ride. This is amazing. And our lives are not going to be like busy. They're just going to be full of all the things that we want to embrace with change. Question for you guys, what's next for you in change? Like for me, I'd love to learn how to do that remarkable, I see people doing presentations and all your documents and so on, like just embracing that. What do you think is the next big change for you too?
I think the biggest change, and we kind of addressed this at our team retreat a couple weeks ago, is that we're changing the way that we compensate our team. And we've been doing it kind of continuously over the last 10 years. But what we want to do is we want to create a model, and we've done a pretty decent job with it, that you can kind of dictate, how much you want to earn. You can kind of dictate how much, time that how much you don't want to earn, how much time you want to put into it. And what I mean by that is that now that we're a global market, we weren't before, now that you can really be employed anywhere in the United States or beyond, in from a company in St. Louis, Missouri. Now you're competing against the entire nation, price wise, salary wise, benefits wise, all that kind of stuff, and not just your local area. It's kind of nice that we can create what we call a variable compensation plan, where we can, find out what the highest range is that a team member should make, what the lowest range is, put them somewhere in the middle as their base compensation. And then instead of getting this weird subjective bonus at the end of the year, let them dictate what that is throughout the year, and getting a variable comp based on, what we use as a book of business as our reference point. But, if they put in more time and they're working really hard, why not create a little entrepreneur inside that model to where they can, make $100,000 coming right out of college, or if they want to take some time and let life happens, or maybe they go through a pregnancy or whatever, and they want to reduce their workload, they have the power of doing that. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to give the employee the power to say yes or no or not yet.
Yeah.
And in the world today, that's typically not how it works. It's more like, hey, you're going to do this, and here's what you're going to do, and suck it up. And we're finding that people just don't want that anymore. They want to have that autonomy to be able to choose.
Jody,
And so we're trying to create a pay structure that allows us to do that, which is super different than what other accounting firms are doing right
Jody,
now.
that's like we just talked about change. That's you embracing change, because the power shifted. The power used to be in the hands of the employer, and now the power is in the hands of the people. And so you go into a performance model and recognizing that people have the power, that is embracing the change and being proactive.
And I'd say for me, the biggest thing that I've been obsessed with in the last 3 months is AI. So we were in a conference in November, and they said AI is coming. It's not here yet, but it's coming. And now here we are in May, and it's been here for like 3 months, and it is going so fast that it is amazing to me. And so I am all over it. I'm trying to embrace it and be as involved in it as I can, and make sure that I understand how to use it and how to use it properly. So I've changed my Twitter feed where pretty much every tweet I see has something to do with AI and how to embrace it and which new AI platforms are out there. And so like that's the biggest thing for me, because I know that's where I personally am going, as well as where Summit is going as a company, and Anders is going as a company. Is we have to embrace AI and we can't fall behind it. So that's to me the biggest change that I am all over right now.
That's great. That's great. I just found a little flaw in the AI. I took all of our tools, Jody. I like 80 tools. I just threw them in randomly, and I said to the Chat GPT, I said, "Can you please organize alphabetically? Because I know how to do that in a spreadsheet in like 7 seconds, right?" And it had trouble. And I had to do it a second time, the third time. But just try that, because it got the numbers and then got them out of order, and so
the way you ask it a lot of times too. That's what I found.
100%. So there is a learning curve, but are you going to embrace that change, or are you going to fight that change and be irrelevant, right? So, well,
great.
that's
So
great.
we're right here towards the end of the show. So I want to make sure we have time for our fun question. So I'm gonna throw this out there to both of you. So early on in the episode, Greg, you talked a little bit about Tom Brady and talked about like leaders in industry or excellence. And so I'm gonna obviously the term you hear all the time is GOAT, right? Who's the GOAT? So I'm gonna have everybody talk about their favorite GOAT. It doesn't have to be sports. It can be sports. It can be entrepreneurship. It can be entertainment, but someone that you look up to in terms of that you feel like is the GOAT in what they do and why you look up to them. So I'll start with you, Greg, because it looks like you have an answer.
Wow, I do not have the answer.
Oh, you don't?
That's so first of all, you probably may or may not know, but our mascot is a goat, because I think goats are amazing climbing animals. And we built our core values around the goat.
I remember that.
Right?
Yep. I remember
the fearless. He's got horns. He's going to go disrupt. He's got a helmet. Life's rough. Wear a helmet. Like go for master. He's got some gray beard and go be a go giver, and he's got a smile. And I did just love watching, like I mentioned, the Air documentary, and I really enjoy those documentaries about true life, because you realize, Phil Knight, was probably the personality behind Nike, but Sal going to get Michael Jordan, and how he took a completely different, unethical, unorthodox, like going right to the parents and the mom and the revenue share, and how if they weren't open to that, and we're going to change. And you saw these, like he's now $4 billion worth of their sales, and they weren't even wondering if they should do basketball along those lines. I think you can learn in so many different places. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, Michael Lombardi, and he was talking about leadership. And we need to, he's talking about his football. He works with Bill Belichick, and they pick out these. And he said, you got to learn, he talks about recruiting. He said, recruiting is not for you to attract, it's for you to eliminate. I thought, that's a nice way to go. So they are eliminating people. And they say you need to recruit from the inside out and then from the outside in, and everyone's doing it the other way. Everyone's looking at the outside and going, oh my God, he's a 440, he can run, he can do this, and he can catch. And like, no, they don't make the team. And he's talking about the systems. So I just see so many of them in such great world, nuanced for them. But I would just tell you that regardless of who we pick, you need to be a better leader next year than you were this year.
Mhm.
and that whatever worked last year is not going to work next year. And if you had the greatest ice cream treat, social, like band, whatever you've done as a leader and incentives and comps and so on, I would tell you that you can't rest on your laurels. That person needs to come up again, right? I mean, the Bill Belichick's, the Sabins, the business leaders that we look at all the time. You need to be a better leader next year than you were this year. And I think if you have that as a mindset, then you will continue to be a GOAT. You will continue to be as competitive, and people will want to come work with you for sure. We unfortunately today with social media, we see a lot more of the social CEOs.
Mhm.
And so, when Uber had that incident where he's literally, fighting with these drivers and stuff, or somebody has something that goes on, I would tell you that as soon as we see that, we're like, that's not our role model, right?
Right.
Right.
So I know you're trying to stay on time there, Jamie. Good luck.
All right, that was definitely great. I know you mentioned a couple of goats there, so I'm going to give you credit for that. All right, so Jody, it's your turn to pick your favorite goat.
Yeah, what way I look at a goat is somebody that kind of changes, not necessarily how it ends up, but somebody that actually makes a change in whatever that industry is or whatever that sports is. And the one I'm going to go is kind of a local one for me, and that's from Indiana, would be Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning definitely, in my opinion, was a student of football. Tons of time put into the craft, make sure that he honed that craft. But also he changed the way that football did with the hurry up offense. He took the hurry up offense, which was only usually done in the last few minutes of a game,
Yeah.
and put that into play throughout the entire game, and really changed the concept of how to play football. Where the quarterback was actually making the calls on the field versus signals coming in back and forth, and so huge game changer. Shaq was also, if you look at basketball, is also one of those huge game changers. They basically changed the rules around him because he was so dominant in the inside, and really made a huge difference. And from Shaq going from just being a dominant in the sports arena to that much more dominant, 10 times more in the business arena. It is, to me, it transcending from what he did in basketball throughout business. And you say, hey, what's my second career? Shoot, look at Shaq. It was his second career better than his first career. Is he a better business person than he was a basketball player? Who knows? I mean, it's pretty questionable. So I look at Manning, and I would say Shaq would be the two that would come to mind. As being what I would consider a GOAT, because they changed the way that the sport or the person is supposed to be.
Great choices. Yeah, and I think both those are really good choices. And I know
You're
everybody's
gonna be
expecting
wrong.
me.
You're going to be
What's
wrong.
that?
You're going to be wrong.
No, I think everybody's
We've
expecting
already
me to pick
picked the right
basketball.
one.
Everybody's expecting me to pick basketball, and I'm actually going to change it on you. So right now I am deep diving into David Goggins, and I feel like he's the GOAT of a lot of things. So I started with David Goggins reading the My Life with the Seal. I think I read that like 10 years ago, where he moved in with the guy and basically changed his life. And since then, every time a book comes out, we dive into it. And so my son and I right now are reading his most recent book, Never Finished, and it is amazing. Like everything that dude writes, like I take a lot of notes when I read, but when I'm reading his book, I feel like I'm taking notes like constantly. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's the thing I need to talk about and think about. So that's right now, like who I think is the go to motivation is David Goggins, and the way he lives and the way he's attacks everything he does. So that's right now the GOAT that I'm focusing on. So.
Actually, we start off talk about the 7 inches. That's the 7 inches, right? It's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. And I just a shout out to Audible books like his You Can't Hurt Me, where he's on there with the author and he's given some commentary and context and so on. Really good listen as well for people. So the journey is never over, right? We don't know who the next author, great author, influencer, the person's going to show up in your life and give you an idea that changes who you are, and you leave a different person at the end of that conversation. So
for sure. Great. Well, Greg, I want to thank you for joining the show. I know you mentioned the website, but any other ways people can get hold of you?
Greg at Pinnacle.guide is my email, 952-445-8604. I take calls. I still answer my phone. I think that's back about relationships. There you go. I challenge you to get 1 million views and get my phone to ring.
Yeah, exactly. We have to change your phone number.
Well, definitely a fun episode. I know like time flew as I was watching the clock. I could not believe how far into this we are, but I think this is a great episode, and our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. So definitely appreciate both you guys coming on and feeding the audience all this great information.
You're welcome. Greg. Have a great week. Take care.
Thank you, you too.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website, summitcpa.net, to get more tips and strategy for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.